Do we have any real world examples that we can share with our viewers on kind of this whole process and maybe how successful it's been for one of our partners, one or two of our partners?
I do, Pete. So I had an electronics company uh, use Seller Central. They did what we call a hybrid approach. So they didn't actually fully leave Vendor Central, but they did open up a Seller Central account and they brought products over. And the reason why they did that was, as we mentioned, new product introductions, but also Vendor Central has a tendency to stock out during peak selling periods. And so we can use Seller Central as a backup for when Vendor Central, even through Born to Run and the other programs that are available, Vendor Central can tend to stock out. And so you can use Seller Central as a backup and have stock ready and available when Vendor Central sells out, so that at peak selling periods like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you would have stock on hand. The other example is we have an apparel company that recently transitioned, and we were having issues with MAP, and it was a big concern, and so they decided to shut off all Vendor Central orders within a 1 month period and move over those ASINs to Seller Central. It was a great transition, and as soon as the stock started to hit into FBA, we could see that the sales volume, we gained a buy box right away, and the sales volume really started to take off within the first couple of weeks of doing this transition. And we were able to adjust our pricing and actually make a little bit more profit because of all of the fees and the cost increases that Amazon vendor would take. We actually are more profitable on Seller Central in this category.
Interesting. I wanted to ask about one of the first example you said about doing a hybrid situation. If I remember correctly, because it was only a few minutes ago, Eric said you shouldn't compete with yourself on vendor and seller. Are you talking about only moving some products and then leaving the rest on vendor? And if so, like kind of how do you determine those products that you leave on there move across to seller? Like what's the cadence there for doing that?
Yeah, so in that example, there were colors that Vendor Central was not purchasing, and so no matter what we did, we were always trying to force Vendor Central to write a manual order to take those additional colors, and they're on the variation, so that was one thing, and then they didn't carry the stock year round, and so when we started to approach peak season, we would send that additional product into Seller Central. But a majority of the time, it was on Vendor Central, and we would never undercut. We were always at a slightly higher retail than Vendor Central during those peak or double selling periods. And we could see where Vendor Central would sell out, and that featured offer and buy box would move over to Seller Central.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so it's like I mean, there's another word for it, a hybrid situation where you're measuring both at the same time, then flipping the light on when it works and off when it doesn't, kind of thing. Very cool.
Other stuff, Pete, to piggyback on the
Yeah.
hybrid, right? Going back to what do we call it? Phase one, step one. When you do that cost analysis, sometimes the cost analysis is not green moving to seller. Sometimes it's more expensive to move to seller if you have a heavier product, for example, that the FBA fee might be too high, or your shipping fee from if you're going to pick, pack, ship yourself, maybe your shipping fee is higher than the vendor central fee. So you might want to leave your heavier, your bigger, your bulkier products in vendor, move maybe your accessories or your smaller products over to seller, and then you get kind of the best of both worlds. For example, you're just kind of really bringing down your cogs and bringing up your profitability.